So we're in the final steps, which is the goals selected based upon the priorities that we have. And just as a brief review, our process that we went through, we completed the session in January. We saw additional input through community surveys in February, completed the report in June, and our consultant Nancy Oley presented the final document to council on June 23rd. Council and the public had the final presentation on June 23rd, and we waited until July 28th to bring the mission statement, vision statement, and core values back to council for approval. During that time in between, we did not receive additional comments or input via personal appearances or other communication between those meetings. We did provide council the raw data from the surveys and also the summarized data. Our next steps identified in the final report included council and department heads reviewing the report and survey results for suggestions that were not found as themes in the report but individual outlier comments. City administration provides recommendations regarding prioritization or amending of the goals given further research or current status. And department heads meeting with their staff to determine action plans to meet the goals. If adjustments needed to be made, they will be submitted to the city manager. And these steps have now been completed, and we're here today to review some of the additional input or modifications that were recommended. And the general consensus, I think, from our departments and department heads were that the goals were well reasoned and well thought out, and they just had some minor changes or updates for council to consider. The priorities identified during our session for economic development have not changed, with top priority votes being on lifting the tax cap, supporting community assets, and affordable missing middle housing. And we didn't have any changes to those goals at all recommended by our staff. And with tonight's tax cap presentation, we did reach the goal for property tax cap, supporting the legislation, and the recommendation of having a session to talk about the talking points and develop additional education for the public. With that, as we mentioned during Lori's presentation, we want to make that available to the public. We'll keep the other video on. We'll post this video, and I'd ask council members to please look at that, review that some more, and if you have suggestions or you want summary for the talking points, please get back with me and we can work on that further. Any other issues you have with that too, reach out and we can set up time to meet. The key priorities for public safety and fire were recruitment and retention, engagement with the community, and lack of funds and resources. And we did have some notes from the departments regarding this, and I did talk to Nancy more about this when we were doing the final report, because I wanted to find out what some of the discussion was involved recruiting efforts and gain more applications. So at this point right now, the Saginaw Police Department and Fire Department are fully staffed, which hasn't been the case for years. Has been for fire, but police usually does have openings. And going back, even when we had 90 police officers in the budget, we probably typically had around 70 because we weren't fully staffed that often. Now we're fully staffed in both, and we are sitting on a waiting list for our police department. So we have candidates ready to move forward in our process. And we did, at the planning session, we talked about increasing the city residents who were employees at the city or getting employees to move into the city, and we had set a goal of 10%. Upon review, we find that 19% of our employees are city residents, so we're pretty much double at our goal. So our revised action plan recommended city administration will develop a city resident incentive plan. And it's a good time to do that. Our collective bargaining agreements are expiring next year, so we'll be starting discussions. We currently do have an incentive plan, but I think we can try to enhance that and do some different things with that as well. So it's a good time to implement something like that. And then sponsor Saginaw Public School students through the High School Fire Academy during the next school year. We have had discussions about this before. We created this program through the fire department and ISD and Saginaw schools to increase city residents who are interested in firefighting. However, we haven't been very successful at getting Saginaw public school students to enter that fire academy. So we would really like to work with the City County School Liaison Committee to talk about how can we get students more involved and do some more outreach with that. And it may be an opportunity for us to do more of that with our fire department personnel who will be working in the schools. And then we had no changes to our goals for engagement with the community. And our no changes to the recommendations either that were in the final report. Arts, culture, and recreation. Most of the priority votes went to building upon what current assets that we already have. Hoyt Park, the Anderson Center here, Celebration Park, Japanese Tea House, positive results downtown, Lawn Chair Film Festival, and others. So we did have some changes here on some of the goals. Walkability was the first item noted, improved pedestrian access on Washington Avenue corridor from the Dow to the zoo within 5 years. That's a great goal, and we had no changes to that. Within 1 year, improved Central Park District to increase use with an annual capital investment of $100,000. The public services staff reviewed that and didn't think $100,000 would make a significant impact on the Central Park district, so they did recommend increased investment to have a greater impact on parks, whether that's through collaboration with the state of Michigan and the county or through additional general fund allocations. I think there could be a combination there. And then planned recreational activities was one of the goals. And we did want to highlight our family play dates in the parks that we've talked about, and Cassie Zimmerman's been working on that. So we do want to provide 5 recreational events annually through the family play dates in the park program, and that is a limited cost, just $5,000 to $10,000. Another goal was partnerships with county parks and businesses and nonprofits. So a lot of what we were looking at with our strategic planning when we were reviewing it with the consultant was the communication point, and I know some council members have talked about that. How do we get the word out more? So this was noted by staff that we do currently work with Saginaw County Parks. Saginaw County Parks provides event programming to an average of 10,000 participants each year with 150 to 175 events. And they utilize several city parks each year. In 2024, they had events at Hoyt Park, Headwaters, Mid-Michigan Children's Museum, Court Street Theater, YMCA, Jerome Preschool, Otto Rozier, Bliss Park, and Fordney Park. And also, we did receive information from the county parks about city residents that attend county parks outside of the city. With Heithgo and Immerman Parks, they've had 70,000 patrons since Memorial Day, and about 40% are city residents. And then there was another goal to facilitate adoption of parks. And as you know, we do a lot of adopting of parks in the city. We have a pretty robust program, so we kind of think maybe the focus is on specific parks, and that may be the communication that we want. Are there parks specifically that we want to look at having adopt a park activities that maybe to engage them more, whether they're neighborhood parks to work with the people in the neighborhood, or if they're parks in the central park system. And no change in the final recommendation there to connect neighborhood associations with organizations that plan arts, music, cultural, and recreational events. One of the comments from Public Services was to direct the investment in parks that was an earlier goal to some of the neighborhood parks to help with that engagement as well. Key priorities identified for neighborhood revitalization included quality, available housing, and affordable quality housing development. 2 of the initial goals dealt with the 2025 countywide study and participating in the countywide initiated housing study and creating those relationships. So since our planning session, Region G has changed leadership for regional housing work, and city staff are included in updates and sit on the Housing Ecosystem Committee. Continued regional partnerships are necessary to attract housing resources. However, this can be done through continued participation with our regional partners and attending any larger regional events around housing. A suggested goal from staff was to organize and make accessible housing resources available for City of Saginaw residents via the city website and available in person at City Hall by the end of 2025. keep up-to-date housing data available for developers and residents, and include housing goals within the master plan. Recommendations remain the same. There's a note that the city will commence an update of the economic development strategy and housing study before the end of the year. Regional findings and suggestions from the Region G housing assessment will be included in that update. Key priorities for utilities and infrastructure included the need to build in the city with existing utilities infrastructure, new and expanded manufacturing. So we noted that we do need better communication and partnerships, but also need to address perception and reality. That was in the final report. The biggest news and probably the biggest manufacturing development has been Corning and HSC, over $1 billion project. Those locations were semi-predetermined because they're built upon the relationship with HSC that's currently there. And we also identified the need for capital needs not being met. We need additional funding for local roads. We do have the county mill of 2 mills for 6 years now, and then this also identified walkability and countywide collaboration. It's similar to parks and economic development. Goals for utilities and infrastructure. So one of the goals was to spend 5% available cash balance on expected capital purchases to be made within 3 years, be in compliance with the city's rate study. Department recommends more flexibility in that spending to be in line with grant opportunities, with a recommended goal to spend available cash balance on capital purchases as grants become available to ensure best utilization of reserves and comply with the city's rate study. Definitely identify the need to spend down the cash balance, but how can we best leverage that as we do it if there's matching requirements on grants or other funds. Apply for a minimum of 5 grants and or 2 appropriations each year to leverage available funds for capital purchases. To help offset the cost of infrastructure improvements, the city currently applies for various infrastructure grants and earmarks annually, likely more than the stated goal. So that may be another point where we need to track and report on that better. And also we could attempt to increase those asks. Repair and replace 3 miles of local streets each year for 5 years. And the department recommended changing that to resurface or repair 2 miles of local roads per year for the next 5 years. And this is based upon the miles of road that are currently on this year's local street resurfacing project utilizing millage funds. This does not include any miles of reconstruction. Reconstruction is more expensive and would reduce the number. One comment we had there was to make sure we have the goals that align with the availability of funds. They also recommended completing an ADA sidewalk ramp project annually utilizing road funding. That's something that we used to do, but I think we've gotten away from that. They're recommending going through and reinstituting that program. And they also recommended conduct a comprehensive review and analysis of proposed rehabilitation and reconstruction projects to evaluate the feasibility of adding bike lanes and incorporate them into the project when appropriate. Goals for building in the city. Development Department added package property information along with incentives to attract new development. The second goal was continuously work to prepare sites for development. So we do have work underway and have been doing this for a while as part of Redevelopment Ready for providing the information. We have that on our webpage available, development sites across the city. So we are working on that, have been. We do apply for grants to market those sites and increase their marketability. I think maybe we focus on packaging those incentives so that developers are aware of what they could receive with those sites. And no change to that final recommendation for utilities and infrastructure. And then the next steps identified in our final report. Department heads rotate individually through council meetings for brief updates on goals and milestones attained. City manager and OMB director Assign light items to goals and action plans for tracking to the budget. As goals are accomplished, communicate their accomplishment to the public beyond council meetings. And those, I think, our OMB director, Yolanda Bland, already has a template set up for the second item. As we move through the year, I think it would be important to schedule department heads to rotate through and report to council regularly. Additional next step, at the end of each fiscal year, dedicate a portion of the council meeting to celebrate the successes where department heads report their accomplishments in relation to their goals in the presence of their colleagues. So that's something that we used to do a final report in our strategic planning session each year. So that might be a way to revamp our planning sessions each year when we're not going through this 5-year reanalysis, is to go through and see how our projects and budget have aligned with those goals. Once higher priority goals are met, council and the city manager and department heads will look at the list of identified goals from our planning session, address those with SMART goals and action plans as part of the ongoing process. Not a lot of changes. So what are our next step? And I think city administration and our staff and our departments are going to continue with the next goals as outlined in our final report and in this presentation. For council, with regard to goals, it's really up to what action do you want to take next. So I think in the original report there was discussion of adopting the goals, but I almost think of the goals as keeping them a little more fluid so that they can change with the budget. If something happens mid-year, they're easier to adjust without coming back and having them improve. If you have a consensus that these are goals that are in line with your priorities, then we move forward and keep those in our departments, and an upcoming report can be the tracking mechanisms that the OMB have developed. You could pass them if you like. It's up to you as next steps.